Excellent. That sounded like a very wet clap. I like it.
Yeah, but it's an Android phone smacked into a hot water bottle.
So I guess today then will be my very first podcast interview for Optimal Sex Life, and I am with a very special person here and has been a huge contributor to my development in this field of holistic sexuality, sex coaching, sex therapy, and her name is Gry Dagmar. So I'd like to say hello to you, Gry, and pretty much without...
Oh, thank you, Aaron.
And without further ado, if I could just kind of, hear a little bit about what it is that you do, how it is that you would label yourself these days so that people get an impression of what you are, and we kind of kick off from there.
Okay. Well, actually, you're asking me a quite complicated question there because it's not so easy to say in simple sentences what it is that I do.
I can imagine.
It's kind of holistic mix-up between a lot of different educations and way of working with people that I've learned through the years. But it's a mix-up. My background is in psychology. And then I have I use this spiritual holistic psychotherapist approach combined with tantra and body work. And my mission is to help people raise their awareness, and it can sound very far-fetched and a bit too spiritual for many, but the point here is that what is consciousness? And to me, consciousness is also starting to be aware, to be able to feel your body and be aware of what's going on in your body, what's going on in my heart, what's going on in my stomach, what's going on in my mind, and finding all the blockages and all the barriers and trying to release those, so that you can live a more free life and be... Actually, my mission is to help people be more authentic and being a better person. And it sounds very cliche, but being a better person to me is being authentic and being able to contribute to the world and to the lives of people around you in a better way. That's more, that's not so dysfunctional as it can be if you're having many blockages and are not able to, and you don't have the resources maybe yet released in your body to take on the responsibility of living an authentic life.
Yeah.
And so basically that's what I do.
Yeah, it's just very, very simple things.
Yeah.
I guess along that line then, what would you say that and this is of course probably changed over your own personal, professional development, but how would you describe your typical client today, and what are they coming to you for?
Well, actually, Aaron, it has changed a lot because it's, I think I am only able to help people where I have in some way been having the same struggles of life as they are having. So what one therapist or, I don't know the other word, so I'll just say therapist or mentor is good at is not what the other mentor is good at. And what I was good at for 5 or 10 years ago is not what I'm working with today, because it's always a mirror to the process that I myself have been going through. So today,
I think that's something really...
What?
I think that's something really important, and I'd be interested to hear about that development, and then maybe you could go into what it is today, then where you're at.
Yeah, let's get back to that, because that is quite interesting actually for all of us, because it's for all of us working with people, and also all the people out there that's not having this kind of line of work. because it's always a mirror of where we are in our own journey through life. But my typical client today, to get back to the original question, is generally it's people who has the resources and the motivation to really go deep and work with themselves. I have a lot of leaders, I have a lot of entrepreneurs, I have a lot of people who has a lot of resources, not only, financially and physically, but mentally. And my experience is, because I was wondering myself, why is it that this kind of clients are coming to me, and there's this. It was never a goal of mine. It was never that I sat down and said, okay, I want to work only with this type of people. I've always been very open, but of course knowing my own interests and limitations in that. But I found out that this was primarily the kind of people who came to me. And what was, there are many key factors that they have in common, but one thing that I noticed is that they all have in common that before they came to me, or when they are in some kind of, hvad kalder man det? Forløb.
That's Danish for those of you who do not speak Danish. And Gry does work out of Denmark.
Yeah, and English is not my primary language, so I'm just trying to find the words here.
What was the Danish word you said?
Forløb.
Forløb.
That's when you book, like, I want to have sessions with you every week for, let's say, half a year or a year, to go through this specific period of time to learn and work with this specific topic.
Ongoing, I think, is the word you're looking for with forløb.
Ongoing sessions, maybe.
Yeah.
But what they have in common is that they have either just hit rock bottom in some way. They've been maybe divorced, they maybe had leave from work because of stress. They have maybe had some serious illnesses, something that has made them, down on their knees, really kissing the floor in their lives. And from that moment on, decided that there's only one way from here, and that's upwards, and it's my responsibility. And from that place, they have gathered so many resources and so much motivation, but at the same time, an enormous, do you call it humility? Yeah. Being very humble. Because what I don't want to work with is people who are still telling themselves a lot of lies, who are trying. You can be in a phase of your life where you have a lot of mental ideas that, I want to let go of this, and I want to learn this, and I want to develop and become this and this kind of person. But you're kind of like stuck in a cycle of never really getting to the point where you actually change and where you actually are acting on it. And to me, it's kind of like I heard somebody I know from the AA movement, and so this applies to alcoholics, but in my perspective, it applies to everybody. And there was somebody in there who said, people are only ready to stop drinking when they have been drinking enough. So if you haven't been drinking enough, it can sound a bit harsh, but there's a truth to it. When I look at my experience and look in my own life and my own story and my clients' stories, that at some point you're going to hit rock bottom. And from that point, that can seem very scary, and that we're trying to avoid our entire lives. We're trying to, build up safety nets and trying to avoid that place of hitting rock bottom. But when we hit that point, something amazing is going to happen, because it's gonna crash all our ego stories, all our defenses, all our identity. If you get divorced and you thought that you were just this happy family kind of person, and you lose that story. Then you have to find another identity. That part of your identity is stripped. If you get stressed and you were a big career person and you had built your life up around being this tough, strong leader, and suddenly you're lying in bed shaking in the morning, crying, and you're not able to go to work, then you have to strip that part of your identity off. And that's where the humility comes in. And actually what I say is that people stop the bullshit. And I am not interested in working with clients that are still, again, a bit rough, maybe to say it this way, but it's true. If you're still clinging to your bullshit stories, then you're not ready to take on responsibility and actually work with yourself. There's a beauty in that road too. It's a part of the journey. And some therapists are really great at working with people who are like to do that, circling around in their own bullshit stories. And I can do that as well. But it's not as motivational for me to work with, and my clients also, because we have reached a point where we no longer want to waste our energy and our time doing that. We want to look ahead and we want to actually make changes. And that can be very physical changes. I want to manifest this in life, and I want to, whatever it is. But to me, the interesting part of this journey is the consciousness journey, where it actually gets a bit philosophical, because you're starting to question life and the meaning of life and who am I and what am I here for? What's the purpose of things? And that's where, to me, it gets really interesting. And that's what my clients basically comes to me for. And there are an array of ways to going about this. We have so many ancient traditions and new traditions targeting this journey of the soul or consciousness or the mind. So that's basically why I have a broad way of working with this. There's so many ways to go about it. And I've been going on my own journey and, of course, picking up what I think works best and what haven't worked for me. But it's not like I'm saying this is the only way that works for you, because we also need to be very humble about what works for me is not necessarily what works for you. So I have a range, or what do you call it? I have an amount of different tools and ways to go about mentoring people, guiding people on this journey of the soul. Or the
Let me jump in here for a bit.
Yeah.
Just to give some perspective to any listeners. And I find this, what you said, is so interesting, that you compared it to Alcoholic Anonymous with people that struggle with these types of addictions. And we normally think of, people that are or like looking for life meaning or struggling with their addictions as kind of like in the middle rung of society. And from what I understand and from what you've told me before, the people that you're talking about are actually phenomenally successful, and what they are addicted to and the collapse that they're feeling is that they're no longer able to buy into the lie of the big mansion home or the car and everything else that comes along with that, and that they found that this isn't what's really fueling them. And even, being CEO of this and that company and making changes that will really impact the world, be it in like the oil and gas industry or banking industry or whatever industry, but they're finding that this is not fulfilling them. And something that I think is just so powerful and I've always really admired about your skills is that you do have this tremendous eclectic range. I mean, pretty much whenever I'm looking at some new person or new approach, you're always like, oh yeah, it's called this, and you're kind of my encyclopedia when it comes to that. And I think I would be very interested. Could you maybe talk about some of this range of eclectic embodied approaches that you use, what unifies them, and then what are the different flavors that they have?
I would love to. First, I would like to say a word or two about that sum up that you just did, because if you look into theory and you like to, if you're a person that likes to put a theory on it, you can look into what C.G. Jung called the individuation process, because what he says is that the first half of life we spent looking outward for happiness and trying to prove ourselves through all these outward physical manifestations. And at some point when we reach the top of that mountain and we're standing there in all our glory and thinking, oh, I reached this annual income, I had that car, I had that wife, I had this and that. And we still feel empty and lonely and distressed inside. And we find out that even at that mountaintop, we can still get hit by divorce and stress and illnesses. We're not protected against all these existential life threats, actually. And then we go into the second phase of life, of this individuation, where we turn inward and we begin to learn that happiness and peace and tranquility and feeling safe and feeling loved is not something that we gain from outer experiences. That's an inner journey. And that's the journey that my clients are actually ready to take and dive into. So that was just a small theory I wanted to attach to that first story.
A quick question off of that follow-up is that I think it's really interesting that then you're having your clients go back inside to find what their true like core values are, and then it always seems though that then once they have that discovery, it's very much motivated to then take it back out to the external world and deliver the good news.
Well, it becomes an outward process, but it's not the beginning, the intention in the beginning. So what's the difference here is that in the first half of life, in the first part of the individuation process, we have all these ideas and ideals and ambitions, and they begin as outward things. And we forget the inner part of the journey, where when we stand at this rock bottom and we start over again, it starts as an inner journey. We actually do not care because we have already, it feels like we've lost all those bullshit stories. We lost the belief in that I will find happiness through the next deal at work, in the next $1 million I earn, and the next wife I get. We have now at this point understood that that is not the way. So we stop using external navigation points and we make new internal navigation points. I want to discover the meaning of life. I want to know my core values. I want to know what the purpose of my life is and how am I going to live it. And when we get to that third step that is about how am I going to live my life's purpose, then it becomes an external thing again. But it didn't start there. So it's from a totally different place inside. And it's with a whole other depth and power and strength. Because also if we then meet obstacles on our way, if we still get sick or get divorced or get fired or the company gets sold or whatever, then it won't hit us as hard. Because we know it's only... it was only a part of the journey. It wasn't the journey itself. The journey is still continuing, and it was just learning. So we don't get... I kind of like... I usually tell my clients it's like finding the eye of the hurricane, where earlier in life we would be swirled around when life was hard and chaotic and messy. We would get blown away and swirling around and feeling all sick and dizzy and uncomfortable. But at this point, you find the eye of the hurricane. So even though life is still messy and complex and noisy, unpredictable, it will always be a storm. Then you find your own center of the hurricane where there's quiet and peace and you're centered. So you find a whole other level of strength to go through all these difficulties. And what I see is exactly that when you go on this journey, actually, basically, now I'm really generalizing it a lot because it is a complex journey. But you can say you start with the question, who am I? Because in rock bottom, we have been stripped of all our identity and ego, or some parts of it, and the rest are ready to go along, then we're ready to ask ourselves, who am I actually, inside and out? What are my values? What are my belief systems? And what is actually in line with who I am inside, and what was just learned from experience or from society and from our culture and from our parents and friends? And what is my own truth of this? And we'll find our way through that. And then we get to the question, what is bigger than me? And it's not like something that we plan on. It's just my experience, as many others have had this experience, that it's a natural development that just happens, that you begin with the question, who am I? And when you've answered that naturally, like a flower, growing, then you will get to the question, okay, but if I am this, then what is bigger than me? What's surrounding me? What is it that I'm a part of? And then you begin that journey. And some people can find religion, and some can find spirituality. It's actually not important. To me, it's just so important that people find their own truth, and that it resonates with them. And some people, they rely on what other people say, like, now I need to go be a part of this religion or this belief system. And it can be also, health and workout and diet, and it can be so many things. But if it's truly an internal process, then you will find your own road and your own answers, and you won't rely on what anybody else is telling you. And when you've got to that point, that you have a really strong, authentic, inward grown sense of self and sense of what is bigger than me, then the last question on that journey is always, okay, what is my part? What is my contribute to this larger than me setting that I believe I'm a part of? Some people will say, how may I serve? That's a wonderful sentence that I use a lot, because then we get to the point where we're ready to... This is a very withdrawn period in life, often when we're trying to rediscover ourselves and the meaning. But then we have the resources now to begin acting in the world. And to me, this is the primary purpose, because so many people can get stuck in this self-absorbed. It can become self-absorbed to sitting there looking inside and feeling, and who am I? But you can get stuck there, as well as any other places along the journey. You could get stuck there. But to me, it's so important that we reach this external point again, where you say, okay, how may I apply these resources to the greater good? And that's what I see in my clients. That's so beneficial, because again, I have all these CEOs and leaders in very big companies where they were very unhappy in their working life before, and were navigating with some totally different, more materialistic values. And now they return. It's not like you necessarily have to quit your job selling oil and gas or whatever you were doing before. But you will find a new framework, you will find a new meaning, and you will go back and you will discover that even though it seemed like an internal process that you were doing only for your own sake, for yourself, then when you start interacting with your colleagues, with your employees, with your family, your wife, your kids, then you will notice a big change happening, and that you are actually making a much larger impact than just your own personal development, that your employees will be more happy, that you will have another kind of relationship, and that actually you will improve your sales numbers if that were your goal, or improve job satisfaction in your employees, and you will improve your family life. Because again, you are navigating from a place of authentic, or what do you call it?
Authenticity.
Yeah. And that will just that will have an effect like rings in water. When you throw a stone in a blank water lake, you will see the ripples, and it will have an enormous effect.
Well, it's just interesting that, I mean, what you're saying to me, and you're talking, you said like not to generalize too much. However, I feel that this is really touching on something that all of us really do go through, and there are, it's Joseph Campbell. He talks about, you know, the monomyth and the mythology that we all live out, and it's really independent of where we come from in the world because we're all humans. And I really recommend anyone to take a look at the book Hero of a Thousand Faces, because it talks about the hero's journey, and in some sense, like, on the hero's journey, there's always this crossing the threshold, and we get these guides that come into our lives that, in the myth, you know, that helps everyone go through the process they have to. And in Dante's Inferno, he had Virgil, you know, that was taking him through Inferno, and he really represents reason and wisdom, and isn't just a guide. He really becomes a tutor and a liaison, and almost a father figure in some sense. And yeah, I'd be curious to hear, like, what is your role then, and then what are some of these tools that you use to help those in their process?
Well, see how that just led perfectly to answering the question you asked me before. Well, I discovered many ways. You know, my primary education and experience started with growing up as a hippie child. So I know yoga and meditation and plant medicine and all this. Going out into the forest and feeling yourself in solitude with all the trees. Then I built upon that my academic education in psychology. So I have this very, rational, evidence-founded in research methods with me as well, and this perspective founded in psychological theory and research. And then along the way, I've been, building so many bridges between those two worlds, this very hippie spiritual world and the very, very evidence-focused academic world. And in that spectrum, I found things like Tantra, or body work, as I will call it today, but still the tantric way of looking at it's much more than just a view on the body. It's a way, this, Erin, because you work with this as well. It's a way of being in the world. It's actually a consciousness and a mindset that has a lot of practices to them. For instance, body work and the tantric massage and the sexuality, the sacred sexuality practice. So I do these things with my clients, and I take them through this initiation process, I call it, where I make sure that their consciousness and their, all the philosophical aspects is followed and are interconnected with the body work that we do, that are de-armoring, breath work, massage, and going through that, combining mind and body, because in the West we're not very skilled at this. We have this, back from Descartes and the dualistic way of looking at life and the human body. I'm trying to reconnect those, and that is what Tantra does so very well, and this body work does so well. We get the body to talk to the mind, and the mind to communicate with the body in a much more balanced way again. And all these tensions, all these conflicts, all these layers of identity and ego are often found in the body as well. It's not just a mental construct. It's almost always combined with some tensions and some blockages in the body, either purely physiological, that you have some tensions and some symptoms, but it can also be in the energy system, in the nervous system. And going on that journey, you can do it very practical. So it doesn't have to be very spiritual or philosophical. Many people can relate to, okay, I have tensions in my neck. And then when we start the journey, we can find out, okay, those tensions were actually maybe old anger that I'm not able to express. And maybe in my life, I'm not very good at expressing anger in general. And then we can start learning how to loosen up by looking at it, taking responsibility for it, and starting to train, how do I feel anger? How do I express anger in a beneficial way so that it just doesn't block my system and tense up my muscles? And on that journey, somehow it often ends up with that all this philosophical, spiritual stuff is coming along as a, secondary prize of doing this work. So
without having to push it.
What?
Without having to push that at all. It comes out on its own.
It comes out of its own. I had a client the other day who has been ill, chronically ill for his entire life, just for an example. And he is very academic and very rational and very not believing in all this spiritual stuff. And you don't have to believe in this spiritual stuff, I always tell people. But he had been going here for like 6 months, having these bodywork sessions and consciousness sessions, also some mentoring on this. And he came here and he had been on the hospital, and one of his chronic illnesses had totally disappeared in these 6 months. And it never happened before. It was only going worse and worse and worse. And then suddenly it disappeared. And he came here and he said, you fucked with my mind, because I thought that, I truly believed healing and spirituality didn't exist. I don't believe it. So my mind is very angry with you right now. But I must just lay down flat in the sand and accept that even though my mind does not believe in what you do and we are doing here in these sessions, then my body is responding to it. And I can feel the change, and it's even visible on the X-rays and on the scans on the hospital. Wow. And I think that's just great.
It's beyond great. That is, you have a very important role to fill out there. So then beyond this, once you've connected them to their body and in their mind, what are some of the other tools then that you tend to see people going? Or does it really just kind of depend from person to person?
It's always individualistic or individually planned. But Aaron, I really need to pee. Is it possible for me to go pee? Can we cut this out?
Yes. Let's take a little let's take a commercial pee break here, and we'll come back to
should I
the
shut
first
this
episode
down, or should I just leave it on and then come back?
Let's just leave it on and hope that everything's still in sync that way. Okay. And then I'll just wait here and look forward to you coming back. Enjoy your pee. Another embodied practice.
So much I can't wait for it. See you.
See you.
And I'm back.
And so we are back from our bio break. And I was just kind of thinking about this, where you're saying that it's important to be able to have individual approaches in therapies or coaching or however it is you want to call this sort of holistic teaching.
Yeah.
And it brings me back again to this metaphor or parallel between Dante's guide Virgil, because he's blind, and I've just noticed in my own practice that as a sex coach that one has to be blind in a very real sense, that in other words, we can have all these techniques and one can write a guide to do this, but when you really start to work with people, you allow all of that to kind of go into the background. You connect with the person. You become blind to your own ego, and then the answers come as necessary. Maybe you could talk into a little bit of that, as you're saying that you have this eclectic approach.
Well, to me, my experience is that every single tool or theory that you have, you need to be able to forget when you meet every single new client, because every person is unique. And every tool and every theory is it's kind of like a barrier between two persons meeting each other and seeing each other from the heart. It's kind of like driving through a filter where now I'm listening to you talking about this, and because I know this theory, and now I'm applying my filter in my meeting with you. Then I start thinking, that must be something to do with rage against your mother in early childhood. And suddenly I'm not able to hear clearly and see you clearly what you're saying. So I can't remember what Greek philosopher in ancient Greece that said this, but he actually said you need to make yourself more stupid. You know, you have to make yourself stupid before your client, because otherwise you will not be able to help them.
That might have been, I know Socrates mentioned about how that he knew more than everyone else because he knew what he didn't know.
Exactly. So there is this really, again, it links back to the word being humble and having humility. Because I also teach, for instance, body work and tantric de-armoring and stuff. But the first thing I really spend time on teaching my pupils, the people who come here and want to learn, is I'm going to teach you all these skills, but actually the skills doesn't matter. And that can sound a bit, hey, what the fuck? Why are you teaching me this then? The skills are important. It's a toolbox that you collect through life, and you put a lot of different skills in there. But the most important thing is your mindset. And to me, my experience is that the more able I am to meet a person without filters, I think completely without filters will never happen, because we have a brain and we have a sensory system that will always filter it. But being aware that we have this and trying to discover, okay, what are the filters that I'm applying? Because before they were unconscious, I was unaware of them. But now I'm starting to become aware of my filters and when I apply them and when I don't, and when they are beneficial and when they're not. And the most important key factor in my work and in all healing is being able to practice what I call unconditional love. And people can be very triggered by this, but my deep down, I know that my treatments wouldn't work if I wasn't able to really see and feel and appreciate and really find a place inside myself where I really love my client. Not in a romantic love, or now we're going to marry, or you're going to be my friend, or no. But in this deep connectedness to knowing that we're all one, and your struggle is my struggle as well. And usually when I explain this to people, I use the existentialistic theory where you talk about the 4 ground pillars in life. There's fear of death and meaninglessness. Is that a word? And you have fear of being lonely, and you have the pillar of freedom. And no matter race, no matter age, no matter culture, as Joseph Campbell in this Hero with 1,000 Faces talks about, there is an existential journey through life that all human beings go through. And we all meet these 4 ground pillars in life. They are a condition of life that no matter where you live, how rich or poor you are going to face these 4 things. So when I meet clients, I can always connect with them, because no matter if, it's an ex-convict for murder, or an alcoholic, or somebody from around the world, from a culture that I do not understand, if I remember my humility, if I meet them with an open mind and try to put all my filters aside and just look into their heart, I will always see that they have these 4 pillars. They have fear of death. They have the longing and anxiety about freedom, and they have, meaninglessness, and they have all these things. And through those things we can connect. But first, when we recognize these common, that we're all one. And it can sound very spiritual, but actually it's also just a condition of life. So it doesn't have to be spiritual. It's just like, the only certain thing when you get born is that you're going to die. And no matter what you engage in of different kind of practices to try to avoid this, you can be religious, you can be overly ambitious in work, you can eat, you can diet, you can, try all sort of things. We are all going to die. So that, we can always connect. And to me, that's the most important thing in my work. And actually meeting people from that place inside yourself and meeting yourself from that place inside of yourself is really the foundation of all healing. And all these things like therapy and body work and tantra, I think they're all just trying, or they're all just, working with this insight. They're building on this foundation and helping us through different tools to recognize this and work with it. So that's why it's actually a very philosophical work in the end, even though it's very practical. Because the other stuff I do is, therapy, psychotherapy, and dynamic therapy. There's always in the beginning, it makes so much sense to go back, this cliche, looking at mom and dad and childhood and the first years, because these are your first primary filters. So if you want to know and gain awareness and consciousness, you need to get to know what filters, what programmings. This sound very mechanical, but it's kind of spiritual as well. But you need to know, and you need to, do you call it decipher? Decifrer.
Decipher your own
because
psychology.
Your brain is just a lump of neurons in your body, like all other cells. But we think it's us, and we think it's very defining and deterministic. But I really, really want to take people on a journey where they find out that they are something more than this body. They are something more than this lump of neurons creating thoughts and feelings. And when we are able to go beyond that, we can start working with it. Because otherwise you will just be a slave of your own physiology and your own story, your life story. And I do not believe that. I do believe that we have the power to transcend this because we are something more than this. And I can also see that it's more than just than a belief, because I walked this path in my own life and saw how it changed me, and I can see it, experience it in all my clients. And when I look around all my network, all my friends, all my family, that it is possible to transcend. But you need to first gain awareness that this is actually the fact, that you have a history with you, and that history that are bound in your body and your lump of neurons that we call the brain is not you. And you are able to transcend that and change it and look in meta perspective. What do you call it?
Yeah.
When you rise above it and you look down.
Yeah, the meta perspective, the meta view.
Yeah. So actually it's that I think all of life is one big paradox, but it's this paradox of accepting that both this is real and it feels painful at times, and it can feel very hard and very seriously because it's your life, and if you're coming here, maybe it's not working so well. So there's this really big seriousness to it. And in the same time, there's the paradox of knowing all this is just a game, and I am able to transcend it, and I'm able to, push a button and turn a wheel, and something will change down there. So it's also kind of like a game, and you can just laugh at it. And when you train that ability to both dive into it and really feeling the seriousness of it all, and still also dragging yourself out in perspective, and changing all the small things down there on the, like playing chess. You can just arrange the what do you call it? Brikkerne.
The pieces on the board.
Yeah, you can change the pieces and the setup. It's not defined that it has to be this way. And because you started your game of chess this way, you are just bound to end it in this certain way. No, you can always change it if you're able to rise above it and work with it. So I use psychotherapy, I use body work, I use tantra. I work with what we call shamanism, which in these times are really trend word in the spiritual realm.
So what does that mean exactly to you when you say shamanism?
Well, it's kind of like all the other things here. You can't define it, so I can only give you my perception of it. And shamanism, in my interpretation, is it relates to the word animism. Is that a word?
Yeah.
Where you believe that everything in this world is connected, that everything is alive. You can
Trees,
hook
animals.
it up with physical terms and ways of looking at the world, that everything is made out of energy, and a table and a tree and a human being we are all made out of energy. There's some kind of energy keeping those molecules and atoms together. So I am not more important than a tree or a table or a rock or a cloud. And when it's kind of like what the Indians says, everything is connected. So it's this cyclical way of looking upon it, that everything that I do has an effect on everything else, and we are connected. Then to me, it's also this, when I realize that I am connected with you and with the table and with the tree and with the stone, that has implications for all my actions. Then suddenly I have a tremendous responsibility again. And that's where consciousness comes in, because you can no longer just run around unconscious and doing stupid stuff like, polluting the planet, dumping oil into the sea, whatever it is that you do, fill your body up with artificial medications, because you now know that this has a huge impact on the entire environment around you, and basically it all will come back to you at some point. So you need to take on that responsibility with this mindset. To me, it's also recognizing that there is a nature and that nature is alive. And nature is both what we can go take a stroll in along the beach or in the forest or in the mountains, but we also have an inner nature. And that's a reflection of the outer nature. And our inner nature is all our imaginations, our thoughts, our memories, our feelings, our emotions. And if I am not, and to me, everything reflects each other. So if I am distant from my own inner nature, if I'm not grounded and able to feel my emotions and express them, and I'm not able to listen to my dreams and take them seriously, then I will also begin to treat my body in another manner, like a machine. Like now I only need to train it and trim it, and so we get distance from our body's true needs for nurture and care and love, and treat it more mechanically as we see in the West. Then we follow this, regime of a new diet or a new way of training or whatever, or giving it medications. So we're starting to dominate and and thinking that is actually the way to feeling better, when in fact we're starting to destroy the entire ecosystem. And then we start to treat nature the same way. We'll start to just throw garbage, throwing that can of soda out the window of the car when we're driving and not caring, just thinking, that doesn't matter. When you know that really does matter, and it will affect my body at some point. It also affects relationships, between people. Because if I cannot nourish and give love to my own inner nature, then how am I able to give love and nourish your inner nature? And then it becomes this Darwinistic survival of the fittest society that we actually are living in. Like in love and in relationships and marriages, especially here in the West, we have this taking mentality. What can you give me? And we go on this online dating and I want this and that, and he needs to be this tall and have this annual income, and she needs to be this and that. And I'm kind of like, oh, we messed it all up here. When did we stop asking, what can I give? And what am I contributing with? So to me, shamanism is very important. And then there's all these, different branches of it, and people, wearing masks and beating a drum and singing and dancing and doing all kind of strange rituals. And I'm just saying none of it is wrong. None of it is right. Just follow your own intuition and your own heart. But there are some truth in it because it helps us access our own inner nature. It helps us to understand that all of life is a paradox, that death is a fact that we can't avoid, so we must as well just accept it and learn to embrace it. And that life will actually be easier and more beautiful and free when we accept death. It will teach us to accept all parts of our inner nature, because again, if we look at the real nature outside Mother Earth, there will be storms and rain and thunder and lightning, as well as sunny skies and clear blue water and warmth. And inside of us, it's the same. There are hard feelings. There can be sorrow, there can be anger, there can be jealousy or feeling of not being good enough or not being loved. And we can have joy and pleasure and happiness, but the one does not come without the other. So again, in our culture, because we distant ourselves so much from our own inner nature and from the outer nature, we have now also forgotten that we cannot be happy all the time. We cannot be in a constant state of feeling fulfilled and happy and full of joy and ecstasy. To me, the journey is as much reframing this narrative and understanding that there will be winter as well. In our society, for instance, now it's diagnosed as depression if you are sad in more than 14 days if your spouse dies. Where in old times you would know that it's normal to be in some sort of grief for the rest of your life, and at least for a couple of years. But now that feeling is so unnatural and so unwanted to us because we want eternal blue sky. That we now diagnose it and we give medications, where this awareness and shamanism tells us, no, it's just winter time. And yes, it's painful, and yes, it's dark, but you cannot force it to go away. You cannot turn on some heating lamp artificially and trying to make winter go away. So when you meet your internal winter, embrace it. When you meet your fury, it's the volcanoes that are, spewing out lava, and it's okay. It's the force of nature, and summer will come again, but only if you allow winter to pass as well. So I think it's such a beautiful way of working with it. And if you feel like going to a drumming ceremony or sweat lodge or whatever you can find in this line of business, go and just follow your gut instinct. Does this feel right for me? Is it true for me? The only problem I can have with it, as with all other things that gets too, popular, commercial in some way, is that really follow your gut instinct, because there are, as in all other lines of business, there are people here who are only here to, because of their own egos and because they want to have recognition and feel powerful and earn a lot of money. So as in all other aspects of life and areas of culture, you need to use your own gut instinct and intuition and feeling into, does this feel true to me? And your guideline is always being able to feel inward. Does this feel true to me? Or is it in some way just feeling wrong? Like in body work, we also encourage the clients to really feel, because maybe you should be able to enjoy somebody touching you there in that way. But if you're not enjoying it, then to heck with what other people say and what it ought to feel like, and embrace, right now it doesn't feel good to me. It's not nice, and actually I get sad or I feel angry, and embrace it and let all those, what you're supposed to do, should and shouldn't, just leave them behind, because they're not serving you.
So if you were to kind of give a quick summary, I guess, of No, that's probably pretty hard. But if just give kind of like people who are maybe scared by the term shamanism, is this like witchcraft or is it some voodoo magic? I mean, in a practical sense, then what are some of the tools that one uses? You mentioned drumming, you mentioned sweat lodges. What else comes to mind?
First of all, I will encourage everybody who are skeptical to read into the newest physics, because what Einstein found out and what our researchers have been finding out with all this energy and dark matter and string theory and all this stuff is actually really, it really applies to shamanism so well. So you can grasp it from a total different perspective, a very academic perspective, and it will still make sense. The tools that I use, like, for instance, breath work or drumming, working with dancing, making sound, singing, using your body. I use these in shamanism, for instance. You build it up around the 4 elements or the 5 elements, but you have this, for instance, fire. Fire is something that just unites people. If you are at a gathering and you light a bonfire, everybody at some point will shut up and gather around the fire and just looking into the flames. And I believe that we as a species are a couple of millions of years old. And I believe in what we call evolutionary psychology, the fact that our cells remember that we today is a product of all of our ancestors' experiences. And the way that we are living today are very new and very modern. Our brains and our bodies are still wired to living back 14,000 years ago when there was ice covering the poles. So there are something existential here or fundamental. For instance, lighting a bonfire, beating a drum. A drum was one of the first instruments, beating with sticks on old logs and stomping your feet in the ground. So this resonates with that part of our cell memory, our DNA, that are so ancient. So there's an enormous power for transformation and feeling of connectedness, because I think it reaches and stretches down through time and our genes. So that is why, even though it can seem a bit strange to a modern person, it makes sense to use breath work. It makes sense to use dance and voice and drum and bonfire, making these ceremonies, because it resonates with us. So that is some of and then it's the mindset. But I usually, like with my body work sessions, where I imply the tantric and spiritual mindset through the very down-to-earth body work, then through this, you will gain these, the longing for knowing and diving into the more philosophical aspects of it just by attending a sweat lodge, for instance. Because the sweat lodge is an ancient passed down knowledge from our ancestors that when we enter this small cramped space where there's extremely hot and you can only go through it if you surrender yourself and you actually make yourself die in a way. You make that part of your ego die that thinks it's not possible to stay in there and who thinks that you're going to suffocate or die in some way.
I can speak into that, definitely. I mean, I remember, I don't know if it was your first sweat lodge drumming circle that you had led or not, but I just remember that whole process of building the sweat lodge, heating up the stones, the knowledge, learning of just how to do it with simple things such as vine cords and animal skin and sticks. And then sitting around there, it really surprised me that as the heat built up and the vibrations of the drums were beating, having much of my mind just going, you can't breathe, like you need more oxygen, and just having to be like, okay, no, I'm going to relax. There's a 6-year-old sitting across from me. He's okay. there's there's a single mom that's across from me. She's okay. There's an older lady in her 60s. Like, I'm supposed to be physically fit and everything, and here I am. My system's freaking out. What's going on? Okay, relax. And then coming through that little death, or that sense of allowing oneself to be like, okay, even if I die, I'm okay. And then all of a sudden being like, oh, there's plenty of air. What was I thinking? And then coming out, and I remember the food just tasted so great, and just connecting with everybody after that, just feeling so alive, and just in that small process, feeling the different seasons of life, the spring, the summer, the autumn, the fading, and the death of winter, and then the rebirth of again within spring and life coming out, and the celebration of summertime. So yeah, I really, really understand on an experiential level what you're talking about, and I wouldn't have gotten that until I had gone through this psychosomatic metaphysical process, because it's both beyond my body, but at the same time it's very much experienced in the tissues that in my flesh as I'm sitting there.
Well, it's so amazing to hear you tell about your experience of this, because it actually sums it all up so well. And it gets me to, I'm thinking there's a parallel to what I talked about in the beginning with my clients having hit rock bottom, that shamanism allows us to hit rock bottom or experience this small death and surrender, where we let go of all our mental bullshit, all the stories that I'm gonna die and I can't breathe and it's too hot and I'm not able to do this. And then when you surrender that part of your egoic mind and actually finds out, okay, the 6-year-old is still breathing and the single mom is still breathing, and I am still breathing as well when I surrender into it. So shamanism holds a very ancient knowledge of how to help people hit rock bottom in a safe environment, where they are going out with a new sense of self that are more aligned with their inner truth, and where they're going to strip off all these layers of stories, of identity, of I like this and not that, I can do this and not that, and I want to go this direction in life and not that, based on outside stories. And aligning you with your own inner truth again. So that's why to me, shamanism is so valuable. I do these vision quests with people that are also a very ancient tradition, where you go into the wilderness and you just hug a tree and sit under a tree, and you don't eat for a long time, and you get these visions. And again, it's a small death. I do this... I don't know the English translation, but I call it wandering in the dark, where you put on a blindfold and you walk out in pitch black darkness in the night in the forest, and you start walking. And again, our neurological lump of cells in the head, our brain, our mental ego will tell us this is dangerous. That you could be eaten by a bear. What if wolves are coming? What if you fall down into a deep pit? What if you drown in the lake? What if you die of hunger? And it starts making so much noise. But by creating the setting for those noises to really start roaring, they step out of the unconscious field, where they have been unconsciously controlling your entire life maybe. They begin to make so much noise that now you're really listening to them, and you find out, oh, I have this voice that are really afraid of being left alone in the dark, or afraid of dying, or so because you exaggerate them so much through these shamanistic rituals, you gain awareness of their existence, and you gain the possibility of surrendering them, letting them go, and transcending them basically, and having a personal experience that, oh, I did survive. Actually, I am coming out stronger, because now I know that I can survive this. I do have the resources. I do have the strength. So this particular voice telling me that I'm going to die from this and that was not true. And then you can de-armor them, basically, and put them aside and go through life with this new insight, this new strength. And to me, that is really the gift of shamanism.
I was just about to ask if you had, for anyone listening, for some sort of personal practice that you could kind of leave them with, but it just sounds like you pretty much just did that.
Well, it can be a bit overwhelming, but just, walking into the forest when it's dark can be very terrifying for so many modern people, because we have all this electric light and we have all this electronic distractions. Then you can have your phone and you can turn your GPS on. But if you for one day decide, I'm not eating today, I'm just drinking, and you prepare yourself so that when it's sunset, you go out into the forest, and you cannot bring weapons or blankets or whatever, flashlights or cell phones. You are going out there stripped down, naked, just you. You can wear clothes if you want, but naked in any sense of tools that are going to help you or connect you with the modern world. And go out there and walk in the darkness and allow yourself to experience that your eyes can actually see 1,000 new details when you wean them from the light, the artificial light. You begin to see the stars. You can navigate by the light of the moons. Maybe you will discover extraordinary senses like blind people have, that you can actually feel the tree trunks, not even reaching for them with your hands. You can just sense them from the echo of the noise that your feet are making from walking on the forest floor. And you will have an enormous strength, and it's an enormous experience for many, just walking into the woods in darkness and see what you find there. Maybe it will transform your life, but at least it will take away one of the demons in your life, telling you that it is dangerous and you will get hurt and that you will not survive. And you can maybe befriend the darkness. That's such a beautiful symbol in this, accepting summer, autumn, spring, and winter. We have a very hard time accepting the darkness. And that's both our dark feelings and thoughts, but it's also outside. We're very scared of the dark and of wilderness in general. So go out and reconnect, and maybe through that journey, you will reconnect with your own darkness, your own winter inside, and find out that it's not an enemy, it's a friend, as well as summer is. And if you transcend it to, tantric philosophy, Eastern way of looking at the body and the energy field, you will have this chakra system. And actually what we're doing is we're trying to operate only in the upper chakras, where all everything is bliss and light and heart. But this really grounds you, and it brings you down to the base chakras, your root chakra, your sacral chakra. What do you call it? The second chakra in English?
Sacral chakra, yes.
It will really give you so much power. It will root you in your life and in yourself in a way that nothing else can. Yeah.
The cliche phrase that comes to my mind is it's always darkest before the dawn. But the thing that something I love about you, so as you were talking about kind of the guide to what people could do to prepare themselves for this practice of walking into the dark, most would say, if you want to, you can go naked. And you're like, if you want to, you could wear clothes.
Well, I come from a bit different world where going naked is the norm.
Well, I feel just in Scandinavia, it's so much more accepted than, in other parts of the world, the personal body being naked. But could you give like a quick little list of some ideas that people could do before they then were to go and journey out into the woods? And maybe also, I remember you told me a very interesting story of when you did this, that of some of your experience when you did it. I think that would be quite powerful for people to listen to.
Fluorescent mushrooms?
Yes, precisely. And not the ones that you consume, the ones you encountered. But yes, please, I'd love to hear about this.
I didn't consume any that day.
No, no. that's a whole other thing, plant-based medicines that we could go into. But anyways, though, yeah, go ahead and tell
First,
this.
I have one more little thing that people can do that I really want to share, and I don't think it's an ancient, practice, but it's one I came up with on my own. And I invite everybody to come up with their own, because starting to reconnect with your own nature is also starting to reconnect with what do I really feel like doing right now. And I found myself in a thunderstorm like the ones we have here in Denmark in summertime, where it's actually very hot outside. And then these really dark clouds come in, and the rain is so heavy. It's like standing underneath a shower. And the thunder are so deep, and it's rolling above your heads from all sides. And I just felt it was the naked talk about being naked that brought this memory to my mind. I just felt like that day, instead of staying inside like everybody does, they stay inside and they hide from this thunderstorm. I felt like doing the complete opposite. So I just stripped down, took off all my clothes, and I ran out howling. I lived in a forest, so it was quite easy not to disturb civilization by doing this. If you live inside a big city, maybe you should go outside, because it can. So
this wasn't around Kong's new tour in Copenhagen.
Exactly. But I just ran out into the forest, and I just jumped around, and I climbed trees, and I stand in the middle of a field with my arms above my head, and I just screamed and howled in joy, and I danced my own little rain dance, and I felt so connected and so cleansed and so refreshed when I get back in. So that was just another tip. Be creative. Wow. Do whatever you feel like doing in the situation.
Beautiful.
How you prepare yourself? Well, this stripping down naked in a thunderstorm and running around, maybe you can't prepare for that, because that's quite spontaneous. But if you know you are going out into the forest in the night, or you know that you are going to a sweat lodge ceremony, the ancient way of preparing yourself will always be some kind of, do you call it fasting? Not eating?
Yes, fasting, yeah.
Fasting at least for one day before you go out. Drinking water is important so that you don't dehydrate, but do not eat, because food is grounding you from having these experiences that you can have, and also from feeling yourself, because eating food can be kind of numbing. It can be like drinking alcohol. It can be
it's a
substitute. Yeah, it's a drug, and we can actually be quite afhængig.
Have an what is it?
Addiction to food.
Addiction.
It's my belief that actually in the West, the way that we see food, we have food in such huge amounts that never been seen before in human history. We have such an abundance of food, and we are feasting in it. We're eating food so many times a day. So just, cutting a bit down on the food will make a big difference. And up to these rituals, really cut down on food, because you will not be able to numb your system, and you will feel much more clearly what are to be felt from your own inner wisdom and your own true nature and your body when you're not filled up with food. It's a very good idea to cleanse in some way, take a shower. It's a very good idea to have an intention. Intention is key in all this. So whatever you are doing, you need to know why you are doing it, because otherwise, how will you know if you find what you're looking for? If you're just going out there saying, this is fun, somebody told me to do it, la, 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 then, well, maybe it will be fun, maybe it won't. But you won't learn anything from it. And this is all of these practices are sacred in this traditional shamanistic point of view. So it's not just for fun, it's for personal development. It's for getting insight, it's gaining knowledge, it's for getting to know yourself better so that you can contribute to the world in a better way. So it's important work, even though it can be fun and a big experience, but it's really deep down in the core of it. It's not to be joked with, and it's not to be taken lightly. So thinking about, why am I doing this? Why am I going to, for instance, go and stay in the woods for a whole night? Is it because I want to get to know my own darkness? Is it because I want to reconnect with nature or whatever? Is it because I want to ask Mother Nature, if you believe in her, if she can help me how to transcend this addiction I have, or this illness, or this problem in some relation or in my work life? You can actually go to nature with an enormous array of different questions in your mind. But my advice is to focus on the one question, the one matter that is most important to you right now. And really be truthful to your own self, to your own heart, because there, you can say, you will always get down to the core. So you might just as well go to the core and cut all the bullshit stories from the beginning. So if you have this story saying, oh, that would be nice, and I would like to reconnect with my totem animal, or la 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 la, but deep down you actually know that it's because you are very afraid of death, then it makes no sense going out there with the intention of, I want to know my spirit guide, or can I get to know the stars better? If the thing that's really shaking you at your foundation is your anxiety of death, then be truthful to yourself and to the nature. How did it do that? And I thought I took that away. And ask the question that is most true to you, and that will be, how can I learn to deal with my own anxiety of death, for instance? So having an intention, and also it's a very good thing, this is very practical, but it's a good thing to share it with someone, that I'm planning on going out into the forest, and I'm going out in this area, and I'm planning on being back by sunset. So that there is a person that you know can bring some safety, that you know they know where I am. Also,
sunset, or do you mean sunrise? What? Do you mean sunset or sunrise?
Oh, I meant sunrise. You go out before sunset, and you come home when sun has rised again. So you stay out for one entire night.
Okay.
This person, preferably, is also a person that you can discuss your intention with, and who can help you get even deeper into the core of what is my issue, what is the thing that I want to go learn and ask of nature right now. And that will be very beneficial if they are there when you return home, so that they greet you and they help you get warm and give you a cup of tea or some soup, and they can listen to your story and help you ground again. That's the perfect scenario. If you don't have that, then at least tell somebody where you're going, and then make a write. Do you call it a diary? Yeah, when you come home, so that you don't forget.
You journal about it?
It's also a way of processing whatever it is that you encounter. What voices did I hear? What voices did my mind create telling me that this was dangerous and that was outrageous and I should go home? And, start to draw your own map of what are the filters that my mind has applied that I haven't been aware of until now. Because then you're on the journey of self-awareness.
Wow. So we're talking about an entire night, not just kind of going out there and you sit there until you think you're done.
You can do that. Aaron. That would be perfectly okay, especially in the beginning. But there is always the risk that the mind will trick you to go home before you were ready to go home. That Absolutely. It can be the voice of anxiety, saying, oh, I'm done now, I got what I came for, now I'll go home. But you can't do that in the beginning to start just practicing it. If you're really scared of it and if you're really new to this, then the most important thing is going out there before the sun sets. Find your spot where you're going to sit, or the area that you're going to walk in. And then when you truly feel that I had enough now, or you can just feel my question was answered. sometimes the answer can come quickly and it will make so much sense to you, and you will feel like, okay, it makes no sense to sit here for 6 more hours when I had my answer. Then you can go home. Always remember to say thank you. I'm very conservative with that. We have to be very humble and very respectful to this kind of work. So always greet nature when you go out into her. I make this portal between two trees or two stones, and I do this little prayer before I go through the portal, where I say, "Dear Mother Earth, dear forest, I come to you today, humble, to ask for your help and your advice on this question." And then I say out loud my intention, and I can say it to all the 4 corners of the world. And then I step over or into the portal, or over the line that I draw on the ground.
It's crossing the threshold.
Yeah, crossing the threshold to the magical space where miracles can happen. And then when you go back, you always say thank you, even though that you don't think you got what you came for, or you don't think you have the answer to your question that you came with. No matter what, you always say thank you and leave the place unharmed, and you go back through the portal, you cross the threshold back into the normal world again. Yeah. And the reason this is, I just generally like that we treat everything with respect and humility, but also because you risk that if you don't have this respect for it in your heart, and if you don't follow these practical guidelines by having an intention and remembering to say thank you, nature will close itself down to you. It will just think, oh, he or she didn't deserve it anyway. They are not happy with what we are telling them, so why should we even bother? So you risk shutting down this channel of information. It's the same when you do dream work, when you want to investigate your own subconsciousness through dream work, that people who don't appreciate their dreams generally tend to stop dreaming as much, and sometimes the dreams disappear entirely. And first, when you really start being humble about it and saying, I don't expect to have dreams tonight, but I would really be grateful if I had. And they start doing this practice, and they start really honoring and worshiping the dreams by writing them down and taking their messages serious and implying them in their life. Then you will, in the other hand, experience that your dream life will become more and more rich and flourishing and telling you more and more stuff. So there's nothing lost and all to gain by being respectful and humble.
Wow. I mean, between trips out into the forest in the dark and running around naked inside of storms and everything else that you've just spoke. I mean, even with the dream work, I just feel like you've dropped such knowledge here and insight that I mean, I'm already, like, just the thought of going out into the woods, I can feel my inner system like trembling at it. So I just have to thank you so much, Gry. You are truly a Viking warrioress. You're also this sexual priestess, and I really hope that that more people have access and can come into contact with you, because I think you have such a powerful message. And I guess before we finish off this podcast here, how would people come into contact with you, and where in the world do you operate? Where in the world are you open to operating, and then what kind of formats, be it workshop, personal sessions? If you could just kind of give a little bit of that so people know how to reach you.
Well, first of all, thank you, Aaron. You are my personal southern wizard as well, and you have tremendous wisdom as well. So thank you for your beautiful words and your recognition of my work. People can go to, it's not just me who has this knowledge and do these practices. So it's important for me to say that there are people all around the world. So, but most of us are hiding a bit in the forest. We're not maybe the first things that come up on Google if you Google it. And if we do, then you should be a bit suspicious, actually. But just follow your gut instinct. Does it feel right? Does the chemistry, does my intuition about this person and this practice feel right to my system? Then okay, you can act on it. If you are interested in me and my particular way of working with this, I live in Denmark and I work in Denmark. I have a clinic in Copenhagen and out in Jutland in the forests. I do private sessions. Sometimes I do workshops and teach. You can hire me for some. I also do, what do you call it? Not lectures, but when I public speaks about this. If you have a group of people who are curious about this, I can come and I can tell about it. But I like to integrate some practical exercises in it, so it's not just mental, but it's also embodied experience. So I prefer to call it a workshop. I also do Skype. I do these mentoring and therapy sessions over Skype. Some things are lost in translation between real life world and online world, but it's a possibility as well. You can find me on my website. I only have a Danish website with a very not easy to pronounce English name called www.nærvær.dk. I think maybe you can write a link or something so people know how to spell it.
What does that mean, by the way?
It means presence, but it's a kind of a game with the Danish word because it also, the way I spell it, means the value of being close to each other or the value of being present. So yeah, you're welcome to email me or send me a text message or something. I am not always responding very fast because I have 1,000 things to do. And when I'm buried in my own, going into the woods and not being in the digital civilization,
being authentic.
I'm being offline very often. So you need to have patience. But I will receive your text or your mail and I will reply at some point. So patience is key here.
Really quickly, for those outside of Denmark, would you be open to, like, let's say a retreat center inviting you out for a week
definitely.
or whatever at a time to...
Always.
Okay, perfect.
They can...
Just wanted to put that out there for anyone listening.
Thank you.
So.
Thank you for mentioning that. I am capable of moving myself geographically to other locations as well. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think with that, we'll wrap it up. Gry, I love you, and
love you too,
I know that I'll
Thank
be hopefully seeing you in about a little over 10 days, so I'm very much looking forward to that.
Me too.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you for
Have a wonderful day,
Aaron.
priestess.
And good luck with your project.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mwah.
Mwah. Take care,
Take
girl.
care.
Hi.